Welcome to Unit 4 as we transition from listening to speaking skills in the disciplines. So if you reflect back on your early career or your early educational development, when were you taught to speak proficiently? Was it in or out of school or both? We know that the standards are very clear that speaking proficiency is required from K through 12th grade as it leads to college and career readiness. So today's agenda, we're going to start by looking at an activity that will lead us towards public speaking and how that impacts not only our abilities to disseminate through speech, but also how we are evaluated from others. Then we're going to look at a framing question that will begin and finish our lecture series that also contains part of a review of readings based on Caitlin Dooley and Yolanda Major and I's papers in the last few years. So one quote to ponder and to start off this lecture is as follows. Depending on the circumstances, conversations across boundaries can be delightful or just vexing. What they mainly are, though, is inevitable. I want you to look at this page for 20 seconds and tell me the number of instances of the letter F that you see. I'll give you that time now. So now, did you find that you saw 3, 4, 5, or 6 instances of the letter F? This will determine your abilities to recognize and be effective in spontaneous activities. There are things that affect your abilities to spontaneously speak in public, such as your attitude, your approach, and practice. But before we get into that, I want to pay attention to the slide previous. How many did you see? Because in fact, there are 6 instances of the letter F. Have a look. Go back and see for yourself. When we think about public speaking in general, a recent Chapman University study found that of all the fears of Americans, public speaking is in the top 5. And one thing that we have to do is manage our anxiety when it comes to speaking in public places so that it makes our audience feel more comfortable as well as ourselves. And one way to do this is to greet your anxiety head on. And you need to reframe how you view that speaking situation. And one approach is to really start with questions and to create a dialogic atmosphere. The second is trying to use conversational language that comes natural to you, but is also somewhat practiced. And the third is if you can be present in the moment and feel out that context and interact with people there at that time, it will appear less derived and less memorized and more authentic in nature. And in turn, you're going to become less anxious as well. So the first tip is to get yourself out of the way. And you can practice this. Try shouting the name of different objects and labeling those with random things. So you might look at the ceiling and say printer, or you might look at a pencil and say plant. Try that for 30 seconds straight, and you will see firsthand how difficult it is. This frees yourself to be able to speak openly, and it minimizes that anxiety that we have to situations that don't necessarily come second nature to us. The second tip is trying to see that speaking engagement as an opportunity rather than an adversarial one. And another approach to help us with this is give a gift activity. And this entails giving an imaginary gift to your partner, just the thing that pops into your head. So for instance, I could say, I want to give you this mouse because I think you deserve it because it needs to take you places in life, and so on and so forth. And you can try to describe that for 30 or 45 seconds. And it's a challenge. And in thinking through those things, it frees us from our previously held anxieties. Those sorts of activities are highly recommended from professional public speakers in the public forum. There are other misunderstandings, and this link will take you to one. For example, when it comes to public speaking in general, But the first is we're always told about the importance of, career day and job interviews. But that's not the only time that speaking skills are necessary. If we think about it, we do this throughout the whole day, whether it be making a podcast like I'm doing now, or calling someone to make a medical appointment, or speaking to your father on the phone, or even going to work and interacting with other people, or even in your personal life. We speak all the time, so we might as well do it well. The second is public speaking within class in college, for example. This is when I first became incredibly anxious as a shy and timid individual. I feared that public speaking class, and I did whatever I could to get out of it, but to no avail. And it really forced me to address this incompetence that I had and the anxieties thereof. And once I got past that, I've been told oftentimes that I speak very well in public domains, and it's because I'm comfortable talking about the content with which I'm speaking. Third is foreign language class. We know that oftentimes foreign language is not taught in a methodical way that's meaningful and authentic to the learner. Too many times you just memorize, going to the pizza parlor or interacting with another student in your class, and it's sort of that 5 to 7 minute memorized conversation. But that's not truly what speaking skills are all about. So let's try to frame the question here. What speaking skills do your students need to develop to advance in your particular field or discipline, which is language and literacy? So I want you to think about how can you develop a plan to accomplish these goals. I think one starting point is to look at the standards, to see what those expectations are, and then to look at your learners and to see where do those align and what else can we do beyond the standards, because we know that those standards and those expectations are really minimum in nature. So Caitlin Dooley in Georgia wrote this piece in 2009 that I thought was very relevant to our discussions on intercultural conversations. And she found that research showed that white monolingual English speakers do not necessarily engage with English learners with particular interest or enthusiasm. And they might, reject speakers of so-called having accents or dialects and not necessarily carry a fair share of the burden when it comes to trying to understand their partner within the confines of a conversation. And so we really need to look at programs to try to improve the participation of English learners within these classroom confines, because as we looked at in the previous few weeks, we know that English learners score worse than even students with particular learning disabilities or special needs. And so language is everything when it comes to content learning. One significant quote that I extrapolated from her article is as follows. I want you to think about it. Intercultural capabilities were long ago described as strategic competence and considered to be an intrinsic part of communicative competence. If second and foreign language teachers are trained in making themselves understood, it was asked, why should students be denied similar training? And I couldn't agree more when it comes to promoting students' voice, giving them the background information and the underpinnings necessary to thrive when it comes to cultural competence. And so I really think context matters. So when your audience, students for your situation, when your audience is comfortable, they can really receive your message. And so establishing genuine rapport and having open lines of communication is paramount in this process. So how do you try to create such a culture? The first is honoring student experience through the following: showing that they have dignity and value. And this is an asset-based view of youth. They come in with certain strengths and deficits. And it's not our job to only look at what they do not have, but what they do have and how we can use diversity as an advantage in our curriculum. Having a commitment to avoiding stereotypes and having a sense of openness and cultural humility. Those dispositions are necessary to thrive when it comes to a 21st century pedagogue. Some strategies that you can use to couple with non-judgmental dialogue include choosing texts that reflect the classroom demographics, right? It's not easy to read about people who you can't necessarily relate to always. And so you want to vary that and make it reflect diversity similar to the classroom demographics, but even beyond that, and provide teachers with powerful information about their students' hopes and dreams and aspirations, and open channels of understanding even among peer-to-peer within the student body. And that's going to lead to deeper dialogue. Other strategies include sharing stories that make room for student sharing through personal anecdotes. These stories should be chosen carefully and kept brief, but they're incredibly important towards creating that culture within that classroom. Other strategies include community studies or student-led walking tours, and these are also available through virtual learning experiences today, where community studies address up to 3 questions, such as the structure that can greatly vary and may involve research and interviews and art and videos and media, and having them be the creators in these print and digital spaces is necessary. These walking tours can increase other students' learning as a result as well. So the student age and physical limitations should be taken into consideration, obviously. However, it's never too young to create content and be able to share that information with others through speaking. One article that I had the privilege of co-authoring recently is talking about what are the prevailing discourses in your schools, and do they look familiar? And my colleague Yolanda Majors calls the language of schooling a language that is both simple and sophisticated, that many schools devise to communicate with and differentiate between insiders and outsiders. So when we think about our discourse, it can not only be advantageous to student learning, but it can also be detrimental, and it can be exclusive. So we have to remember to be careful with our word choice. So some do's and don'ts to really take us away towards developing speaking skills within our student body. And the first is avoid generalizing about any faction of the population. Remember, the easiest way to do this is if somebody says, for example, all Korean students are good at mathematics and science. So just replace Korean students with your own identity. So you could say all white males are good at mathematics and science. Well, that sounds absolutely ridiculous. And I think that's the easiest way to identify that we should not be generalizing, is to place our own identities within that stereotype. And then it sounds ridiculous. The second is to shift the deficit discourse away from what seems to be wrong today, or what are his struggles in reading and writing, and I'm here to fix the problem. These sort of medical deficit perspectives stymie the learning process and automatically assume that something is wrong and that you're to be the superhero to fix it. But schools don't need superheroes. They simply need someone that is observatory, somebody who can see what students bring to the table, somebody who can listen, and somebody who hears their needs and identifies their needs, and then somebody who's willing and able to put things in place to build upon what they bring to the table. And that's what I mean by the third point here in terms of leveraging diversity. How can we tap into those strengths, whether that be multiple language for a bilingual, tech-savvy, or a sports player, that adds multiple dimensions to what we're talking about in class. And it allows learners to learn from and with